If you love Name Explain, then please consider leaving a super thanks in the comments of this video. It's a great way to make a one-time donation to the channel and help support Name Explain. The languages found in modern Europe are pretty uniform in a lot of ways. Most derive from the Indo-European family tree of languages that can all be put neatly into groups within that family, like the Romance languages of French and Spanish, the Germanic languages of Dutch and German, the Slavic languages of Polish and Czech, and so on. There are of course, however, some languages found in Europe that don't conform in this way. Take Albanian in example. While part of the Indo-European family of languages, it sits alone on a branch with no other living relatives. Then we also have the Uralic languages of Europe, most noticeably Hungarian, Finnish and Estonian. While these three are all related to one another, they aren't part of the Indo-European tree. And there's of course also Maltese, Europe's very own Arabic language, as we've talked about before. But there's one language in Europe in particular that bucks the trend of all the other languages of Europe in a very odd way. On top of this is a seriously perplexing, mysterious, confusing, ancient and bewildering language. This is of course the language of Basque. Basque is an absolutely wild language in so many ways. Basque is spoken by the Basque people in the Basque country, an area of Europe in the west of the Pyrenees that straddles between Spain and France, though primarily within Spain. One of Spain's autonomous communities is called Basque Country, and yes, it resides within the wider Basque Country area. The perplexing things about Basque begin with its very origins, and that's because we have no idea where it comes from. It has no relation to any other language. We know this because its words sound nothing like the words of other nearby languages. Take the French and Spanish word for big, grande. These are more or less identical to one another, so we can assume that these languages must be related in some way, shape or form. The Basque word for big, however, is hondia. This sounds nothing like the French or Spanish word for big, nor any other language's word for big, so we can assume that is a completely isolated language. What makes this even wilder is the fact that Basque is nestled between France and Spain, so the fact this language sounds nothing like either of those makes it even more perplexing as to how it's so isolated. The leading theory on the origin of the Basque language is that it comes from an ancient long-lost language that we have dubbed Iberian. This language of Iberian eventually died out, but Basque continued being spoken, though that's just a theory on the matter. As to why this language is so isolated, well, the leading theory in that case revolves around the geography of the land in which it is spoken. Basque country is nestled within the Pyrenees as mentioned, and this mountain range could be pretty inaccessible, especially in the ancient past. This means that the Basque language could evolve in an isolated environment, and conversely, people who spoke other languages couldn't easily get to the ancient Basque speakers, so the language couldn't be influenced by outside tongues. Basque, as mentioned, is also super old, older than things like Old English, Old High German, Latin, Old Church Slavonic. In fact, it predates every Indo-European language in Europe, as we shall talk about. It's widely considered to be the oldest living language in Europe. It's believed to date back to Neolithic times as a language spoken by hunter-gatherers. Basically, it's super old, super unique, and super mysterious. Basque is such an anomaly in the realm of European languages that there's even a myth involving a certain someone trying to learn this language but to no avail. Basque is seen as a very difficult language to learn due to how unique it is, as it has no relation to other languages. For example, if you wanted to learn Spanish but already knew Portuguese, things would be a little bit easier for you because they are related. This isn't the case with Basque, as there's no other languages it relates to. Someone who once, according to myth, tried to learn the language was none other than the devil himself. The devil wanted to learn Basque so he could corrupt the people of the Basque country and send them to hell. However, after 7 years of trying to learn it, he gave up as it was too complex even for him. This is why Basque has also become known as the language the devil couldn't learn. It's quite the feat for a language to be so complex and different that even Satan gave up on it. Basque wouldn't have always been such a strange anomaly, however. In Europe's past, there would have been other languages like Basque, ones that didn't relate to any other languages. These kinds of languages are known as pre-Indo-European languages because they were the languages spoken in Europe before Indo-European languages took over the continent. Basque is the sole surviving pre-Indo-European language in Europe. While its contemporaries are no more, Basque has been able to outlive them all and is still spoken to this very day. According to Wikipedia, there are around 750,000 speakers of the language today, with 343,000 of them being able to speak it passively, and 6,000 of them being monoglots. This means that there are 6,000 people on our planet who only speak this ancient mysterious language. If you happen to be one of those 6,000, please let me know. But I guess you can't understand what I'm saying right now. My bad. The fact that Basque has survived into the modern day just adds to the enigma of it all. There have been plenty of chances over the millennia for this language to be wiped out like many other pre-Indo-European languages, but it wasn't. The first thing that could have wiped it out was the Indo-European migrations. These are a series of hypothetical migrations around Europe that potentially explain to us how Indo-European languages became the mainstay of the continent, and in turn wiped out many of the pre-Indo-European languages. These migrations are thought to have happened from around 4000 BC to 1000 BC, yet for some unknown reason, these migrations never made their way to the Basque country. This was probably because of just how isolated the Basque country is. It's surrounded by mountains, as mentioned, so those early migrators probably wouldn't be able to settle there, allowing the Basque language and people to flourish, while the other tongues of Europe radically changed. The Basque language stayed isolated for thousands of years after that. The next potential threat to the language came in 196 BC. This is when the Romans finally arrived in the Iberian Peninsula in the midst of the Punic Wars. The Roman Republic, which would become the Empire, had a huge influence on Europe, one that set many of the modern borders and languages of Europe to this day. What's interesting about Rome is that while they claimed huge parts of Europe, they actually let many of the cultures they claimed carry on just doing their thing, as opposed to forcing Roman culture on them. It's one of the reasons why the Empire lasted as long as it did. Despite this, however, the Latin language still influenced many parts of the Empire, giving us the modern Romance languages today, which usurped the native pre-Indo-European languages once spoken there. This of course didn't happen to the Basque language. Rome did have possession over the Basque country, but the language survived. This is because the Basques and the Romans became key allies. Together they defended the Iberian Peninsula from the Celts and other Iberian tribes. The Basque country and the language thrived during its time under Roman rule, unlike many other languages during that time period. Of course, Western Rome would eventually meet its demise, and the Basque country wouldn't ever be as dominant as it was during this time. During the Middle Ages, the Iberian Peninsula saw all kinds of powers claim its land, from Germanic tribes to the Islamic invasions of the 8th century AD. Yet despite all this, thanks to its proud heritage and isolated location, the language was able to carry on being spoken during all this upheaval. Something that really helped the Basque language and identity find protection were a series of laws that were put in place during this time, known as the Pharaoh. These highlighted how important it was for the Basque country to maintain its own degree of autonomy. This greatly helped the language maintain itself and protect itself from outsiders. The language faced its biggest threat, however, years after, when Spain came under the rule of dictator Francisco Franco during the Spanish Civil War in the 20th century. During this time, Franco banned the Basque language, calling it an enemy of God. This is because he forced the use of Spanish language above everything else. With this ban in place, the language did start to dwindle, but it was still spoken by small pockets of people in secrecy. And thanks to this undying support, once the language was unbanned, it meant it still had speakers who could help revive the language. This all means that this supremely resilient language that could easily have been erased from our planet on numerous occasions is still around to this very day. It's absolutely wild. Every single aspect of this language is perplexing, from its prehistoric origins, to its isolation, lack of connection to any other language, and to the fact that it's still around to this day. And you know what? I love it for that. Basque gives us an insight into what language was like in Europe from a time before the likes of the Romans, and even before Indo-European languages were really a thing. And of course, we have to talk about that name. This is name explain after all. It should come as no surprise that we aren't entirely sure as to where the name Basque comes from. The leading theory on it is that it might mean something like foresters, but we aren't entirely sure. Though of course, as I'm sure many of you know, the final confusing thing about this language is that in Basque, Basque isn't called Basque. It is instead called Uscala. Like with the name Basque, this one too comes from equally unknown roots. Basque is undoubtedly one of the biggest mysteries in the world of language, and it seems for the time being, many of the mysteries surrounding this language will remain unsolved. Name Explain depends on viewers like yourself supporting the channel financially on Patreon, so a huge thank you to everyone who does. Donating just $1 a month helps the channel amazingly and gets you bonuses including ad-free videos, exclusive content, the power to request ideas to be made into actual Name Explain videos, and your name at the end of the video with all these awesome people. Visit patreon.com/Name Explain or click the link down below to find out how you too can support the channel. Thank you. Thanks for reaching the end of the video. Why not watch another and subscribe to keep up to date on all things Name Explain. You can find myself on Instagram where I'm Name Explain YT and join the Facebook group Friends of Name Explain to talk with myself and other name nerds. All that will be linked down below. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and once again, thank you all so much.